Talk Live.
Welcome to episode number 15 of the Free Talk Cast, brought to you by patreon.com/LRNFM. If you want to check us out there, that's the best way to show your love and support. Again, that is patreon.com/LRNFM. Hopefully you're listening directly at freetalkcast.com, but the podcast is also available at a number of other places like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. It's available in all those places except Apple Music. And that's because putting it on iTunes is such a pain in the ass that I just...
But is it still on the Apple podcast?
No.
No, so it's not on Apple at all?
No, I think the Free Talk Live audio archive is, but the Free Talk Cast isn't because I'd have to create an iTunes account and go in there. And
really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised the podcast distributor wouldn't
be
able to do that.
With all of the others. But
Apple's just a pain in the ass?
Yeah, they do their own special stupid little thing that is tremendously irritating.
Not surprised?
No, this was an issue I had with the Call to Freedom way back in the day, and getting it on there was every bit as big a pain in the ass. And then we didn't get as many downloads because most of our audience aren't really Apple users.
Yeah.
So it's like, why go through the effort of putting it on this platform when most people that listen to our show aren't on that platform?
Yeah.
So... Anyway, you have a story, or an article rather, about smartphones.
I do. So I actually discovered this because I was reading the book. Now I have to pull it up because I forget.
This is something I noticed in prison, and I don't want to give away the context of the story here, but it's basically that smartphones are a distraction.
Oh, absolutely. So the book I was reading is called The Anxious Generation, and basically psychologists are discovering that teenagers who pretty much anyone that grew up after 1995 who went through puberty during the time of smartphones.
Right.
Basically, they're extremely anxious. They high levels of ADHD, just not very well. They're just basically like cognitively very impaired. And I'm actually not surprised by that. And I fall into that category of people. And I've even seen it in myself where, kind of short attention span, I've been able to remedy that a little bit, but it has been a very conscious effort for myself to not really expose myself to short format videos that are like changing frequently. You know what I mean? Like TikTok style. Yeah. Exactly.
I like what TikTok represents, but I really hate, one, that it autoplays videos. And I really hate that the younger generation doesn't seem to know how to use Bluetooth earpieces. So my coworkers very frequently, when there's nothing to do, will sit in the back watching TikTok videos. And it's just, first of all, phones have terrible audio quality, and I hate them. But when you hear that tinny kind of audio and it's changing every 3 seconds as they're scrolling through TikTok.
And the songs, like the audio that they use is just very repetitive. Yeah, it's just poor social etiquette.
Yeah. And
I've been in the car with people who they're in their passenger seat and it's just all of the dumb TikTok songs over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah, it's like, get out. Don't do this in somebody else's car. That's so rude.
So I'm not among that generation of people. I'm a little bit older than that. So I guess maybe I'm fortunate in that regard. I was also, I don't want to say fortunate, but going to prison did have some fortunate aspects. And one of those was that I spent 11 months without a smartphone.
Yeah.
And it was a relief, really. It alleviated a lot of the pressure. I didn't have to worry about checking emails or getting text messages or responding to phone calls. I did have access to the email system in prison, but it's on such a huge delay that it's not like your actual emails on your phone.
Yeah, and I think desktop format is very different than having it like 24/7 in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, we discussed that a bit recently on Free Talk Live when I was on with Chris Wade, where I pointed out that these smartphones, yes, they are computers, but they are not work devices.
Yeah.
Like a desktop is a work device. When you sit down at it, you're sitting down to do some kind of work. But for years, I have kept my phone on silent all the time. I do have it set up now with a silent ringtone and a silent notification, and a few select people have actual notification sounds so that when they text me, I will actually be aware of it because it might be important. or it's just someone that I actually want to communicate with right then. But I have found it to be much less stressful to not have my phone demanding my attention all the time.
Yeah.
And this was true before I went to prison as well, where I kept my phone on silent. But that's the relationship that most people have with their phone. It makes a noise, and by making that noise, the phone demands their attention. And most people are more than happy to give it because of all of the dopamine rushes and serotonin and all of that crap that phones give you. But by keeping my phone on silent, my phone gets my attention when I want to give it.
Yeah, it's like you have control of
Yes.
the situation.
Instead of my phone demanding my attention and me giving it, I determine
Yeah.
when I'm going to pay attention to
You
my
know,
phone.
something I didn't really think of that the book, The Anxious Generation, talked about was when you're having like an in-person conversation or experience. A lot of the times, if somebody gets a phone call or if their phone makes some sort of noise, vibrates, whatever, people will divert their attention from the person in front of them and immediately check their notification. And that even if the other person isn't really conscious of it, that is signaling to them that their cell phone is essentially more important than the real life connection. And it actually disconnects people because they're constantly being told almost subconsciously or indirectly that other things are far more important than the actual connection.
Yeah.
So, and it was something I never really thought of before, or even, if you're out to dinner or hanging out with friends and everyone's just scrolling on their phones, texting, whatever. And it's like, why are we even here? What are we doing? We're just sitting next to each other doing this solo activity that is usually very mindless and isn't even cognitively stimulating. It's just like an energy suck and a time
scrolling,
suck.
they
Yeah,
call
it's
it.
doom scrolling. That's exactly what it is. And I think used responsibly, the internet can absolutely be a wonderful resource. I have learned so much even on some social media platforms, but I've really taken a step back from especially Instagram and Facebook. At this point, I really only use it for marketing and business and stuff like that. And I have a select few Facebook groups that I really enjoy the discourse in, but for the most part, I've really taken a step back from the doom scrolling just because I think it's so bad for everybody. And it's especially so bad for teenagers. And now there are children that have phones. I mean, my cousin her daughter had access to TikTok at like maybe 7 years old, 6 or 7.
Goodness, yeah.
I mean, that is just inappropriate. And I don't think she's going to listen to this. So it's kind of, whatever. But it's just so inappropriate for so many reasons to give a literal child access to, not only the platform where it's going to like cognitively delay children and make them anxious and depressed and all this stuff, but a lot of the content on there can turn inappropriate really, really quickly. I mean, even YouTube, there was the whole thing where YouTube Kids got infiltrated with these, some sort of, prankster's the only word I can think of, but essentially what happened was on Peppa Pig YouTube videos, which is
Some kids show, right?
Yeah, some kids show for like very, very little kids. Someone somehow posted videos on YouTube Kids of Peppa Pig videos, and then in the middle of it, they cut to like really inappropriate content where someone that was like, go kill your parents, and to little kids, this extremely inappropriate, violent, horrible content, and it somehow got past whatever safeguards were set in place for YouTube Kids. And this is the kids version of YouTube too,
Right.
that is supposed to have all of the safeguards and, you can let your kids have iPad time and you don't have to monitor them. This is safe. Even that's, proving to be not so safe. So I think across the board, it can be pretty dangerous unless the parents are pretty much constantly monitoring it.
Yeah, and I don't think they can. That's something I had never really thought about before, is that you don't just have access to TikTok and YouTube Kids and stuff when you have a smartphone or a tablet or iPad or whatever. You have the same access to the internet that every single adult in the United States has.
And there is parental controls, but let's go to teenagers, even middle schoolers. They know how to use technology better than their parents do.
Yeah,
So
very true.
in that book that I keep referencing, they discussed how there were parents who noticed that their kids were highly addicted to the phone and were exhibiting very negative side effects from the constant phone use. So, or they were getting into inappropriate content, whatever. So they put safeguards on the phone, and it is just so easy for kids to just go into the settings and
Disable it, yeah.
yeah. And I guess there's ways, like one mom banned her child from going on Instagram, and the kid figured out a way to hide Instagram and like hide it under some other apps, and the parents weren't able to see that it was there. So
That's crazy.
I don't.
And it's not just smartphones either. When this sort of subject comes up, I think about my nephew, who's probably 16 or 17 years old now, riddled with anxiety. He's going to be in therapy most of his life, due not exactly to this reason, but to related reasons. And he's been around a television being on his entire life. Mm-hmm. Before he started kindergarten, I think, or maybe it was after he started kindergarten, if he was home and a television wasn't on, he would have actual full-blown panic attacks.
Wow.
Like this 6, 7-year-old kid would go into a panic attack simply because a television was not on. And that's because he had been conditioned from essentially the time he was born to expect that when a television wasn't on, it meant that something was wrong.
Yeah. Wow, that's awful.
And I don't know if he ever recovered from that, but when I last visited him, he was watching TikTok on his television, and he was watching some 3-minute video about dung beetles or something. And I was like, okay, well, I guess at least it's educational, but it was just background noise in the same way that I have background noise on when I'm going to sleep at night. So it wasn't really that he was learning anything. He was just wasting time.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this phenomenon, and I hate it just because I'm not used to it, and I think a lot of like older people probably feel the same way. But it's like a TikTok format video, and it's somebody talking about something. So it's like a split screen, and on the top, it's somebody talking about something. And on the bottom, it's some random video playing, like anything at all, like animals or a race car, like seriously anything, but it's completely unrelated to the topic. So it's not even like, oh, it's, it makes sense if you make a video and you're talking about gorillas, and you have like some B-roll of gorillas in the background. That makes sense. That's relevant, but it's some completely irrelevant content. And apparently, it's because children who have grown up with this sort of, like overstimulation, they can't pay attention to something unless they're overstimulated. Essentially, like overstimulation is their baseline. Like, what would be overstimulation to you and me, and we wouldn't be able to pay attention to something, is like what they need to be able to pay attention. And that just shows how their brains have essentially been rewired. And I don't think it's been rewired in a good way, because as we're seeing, suicide rates are skyrocketing, anxiety, depression. It's really rough to be a teenager these days.
And it seems like it's sort of related to hypnosis, or at least similar to hypnosis, where it's like, hey, pay attention to this thing while I talk about something completely unrelated, and just let my words sort of filter into your mind.
Yeah.
While you're paying attention to this completely different, unrelated thing. I have seen that form of content. I never really gave any thought to why they did it, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because people are overstimulated, and if they just have that person sitting there talking to them, they literally cannot pay attention to it.
Yeah, it drives me crazy because I see that, and one, it just doesn't make sense to me, so I think it's dumb. And then two, I can't pay attention to it's too much.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure that our grandparents would be perfectly stimulated just sitting down and watching television.
Oh, yeah.
I, however, can't do that. I would need to play a game or something with the television going. But at that point, why watch the television and just play the game, right? Mm-hmm. Or read a book or something like that. But it always comes back to, why have the television on? Just play music instead.
Is it because it's passive?
Yes.
You're not interested in like a passive activity?
Right.
Yeah.
I get bored.
Mm-hmm.
It's not stimulating enough to my brain or my desire to actually do things.
Yeah. And I've heard of some people who, if they're listening to a podcast or something or watching TV, they need to be doing some sort of busy work with their hands. So like some people will knit, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I think it is signaling some sort of imbalance. Because think of it, 200 years ago, people just sat outside and just enjoyed the outdoors or whatever. Like people were content doing nothing and being quote unquote bored. And now, I mean, even myself, if I'm bored for a second, I'm like, oh, there's so much to do. Like, let's go do something. Oh, I can listen to a podcast. I can watch a YouTube video. I can, clean the house. Like I have a million things that I can constantly fill my day with. And I actually don't think I think doing nothing is important for us to kind of decompress and process a lot of the feelings and emotions and experiences we're having throughout the day.
I hate to admit it about myself, but I certainly would not be content to just sit outside and chill for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Like even when I go outside to smoke or whatever, I take my phone with me and I see what's in the news, or I read an article about a game or whatever coming out, or a band or whoever. But I don't think I've ever, not in a long time at least, just sat outside and chilled.
Yeah.
Even when I was in prison and my options were limited, when I would sit outside, I would usually take a book or a pen and paper to write something. And I don't know if that makes me terribly unusual, or if that's more or less what people would have been doing 200 years ago as well, and just reading a book as they sat outside,
Yeah.
instead of just sitting there doing nothing. But even in prison, I never really just sat there doing nothing. I did meditate, and I guess that's sitting there doing nothing, come to think of it. So I guess that's not true for me to say, but at the end of the night, I would write before I went to bed instead of watching television or engaging in some other mindless activity. And I think that was probably a good thing, but I don't know that reading a book and listening to music is any better than playing a video game before going to bed.
Yeah, it's the same concept. Probably a little bit of a, I think there's pros and cons to each. I think the main thing that's coming to mind with something like a book or drawing is it doesn't have the blue light, which disrupts melatonin, and melatonin's extremely important to fall asleep, but also for a lot of like stress regulation and stuff like that. Melatonin's really important. And a lot of people these days, because of we're constantly being bombarded with blue light, a lot of us are deficient in melatonin. And I actually found out today that from the last time you come in contact with blue light, it takes 2 hours after that for your brain to produce melatonin.
Wow. Okay. So this is why they say don't use your phone 2 hours before bed.
Yeah. So in like some people, like I can like be on my phone and then fall asleep immediately after. But I know a lot of people who have issues sleeping and they're laying in bed either on their laptop or scrolling on their phone.
Right. And that's one of the last things you want to do before going to bed is scroll through your phone, precisely because of the blue light. And even if it wasn't that, though, the stimulating aspect of the smartphone, and yes, it's doom scrolling and it doesn't do anything for you intellectually, but it still stimulates your brain to some degree, and that's why people want to do it so much.
Yeah, you're thinking about stuff.
So I noticed a number of years ago that I would sometimes forget my phone while just running to a convenience store that was not even a quarter of a mile from me. Like we're talking a 5 to 10 minute trip. And I started doing this on purpose after I did it the first time on accident, when I realized that it actually caused me anxiety to not have my phone with me when I did that. And I was recently doing something for work where I left my phone at the store and I went to go do something, and I experienced something very similar then. Like, oh my God, I'm out here with like no tie to the rest of the world. And that was an enjoyable experience, really. It's been enjoyable to not have my smartphone demanding my attention all of the time, and to care so little about it that I can just leave it downstairs when I go to bed at night, or just forget it at work.
That gives a lot of people immense anxiety. Like they can't even do it. I remember the other day I left my phone in my friend's car, and which is very out of character for me. I usually whatever, but I was almost proud of myself because I'm like, oh, it is what it is. Like I'll get it eventually. I don't even have a way to contact this chick. So I just kind of have to trust that she's going to bring me my phone, or maybe I'll go to her house tomorrow. But,
Wow.
But, and then eventually I started to get anxious about it. I'm like, oh, I have meetings tomorrow and my calendar's on my phone, and, and then it kind of started, but.
Well, not to really equate the two, but I can imagine it's something similar to sending your kid off to their first day of school or their first sleepover or something. You're supposed to experience anxiety and stress and worry the first few times that it happens. But the more it happens, you become more comfortable with it, and suddenly it's not a big deal.
Yeah, you know that it's safe.
Right.
It is kind of very similar where it's like you feel it's like a cell phone's almost like a lifeline, right? It's like, well, what if I need to get in contact with somebody, or what if there's an emergency? And yeah, some of that is valid, but
Right, but how often does that really happen? Like
very rarely,
It's good to have your cell phone in the event that your car breaks down or you get into an accident or there's an emergency and someone has to get in touch with you. But as I think about it, those things have probably happened once to me in the last decade. So that's not a valid excuse to have this destructive device with me at all times, considering it doesn't really bring any value to my life, and that utility of it to be available during an emergency doesn't really seem to be applicable here. It doesn't really seem to ever be needed for that purpose. It's just texting coworkers and friends and my boyfriend and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you can do that with a flip phone.
That's
right?
true. You very much can.
And I think that is when the shift happened from flip phone to smartphone, like around 2015, where the smartphone became widely distributed.
Yep.
Really was the shift where we saw a lot of damage with attention spans. And I mean, significantly, the effects were more, we saw it a lot more in teenagers and children, but I think a lot of adults were affected by that as well. Even,
Certainly.
like a lot of people in like my mom's generation, like baby boomers, a lot of them are on TikTok scrolling, and, they took to this new format very quickly. And I'm, what I'm concerned about is for like people as they get elderly, that sort of stimulation, it scratches the itch of being stimulated, but it's not actually working out the brain. You know how they say when you get older, you should learn a second language or volunteer or do Sudoku puzzles, like something that is working your brain. The mindless stimulation is going to prevent a lot of older people from working their brain, and I think we're probably going to see a lot more like dementia symptoms in people because of that.
So all around, it sounds like smartphones are just pretty devastating and not helpful.
Yeah.
And I hate saying that because I do like my smartphone. It does. But really, the only reasons I like it are because it allows me to text people. And as you rightly point out, I can do that easily with a flip phone. However, there's no chance whatsoever that I'm going to take this Samsung S24 to the AT&T store and swap it out for a flip phone. That's just not going to happen. If you can even find a flip phone these days.
Yeah.
Because this is so much more versatile.
Yeah.
And it does have value to me when I'm sitting there waiting somewhere for whatever reason, and I've only got 3 or 4 minutes, and I can read a quick article or even doom scroll.
Yeah.
That is at least something to do. But in the 90s, when I was a kid, what we would have done instead was bring a book and read a book instead of doom scrolling. And I tend to think that's probably a little bit better because the book, in addition to being more engaging, even fiction will help a person learn because there's always little tidbits of information in there, or they just become more proficient at reading, which allows them to better process other information that they need to take in. So I would highly recommend reading. Chess is another really good activity for people who need to calm their brain down because chess requires you to just sit and think. And the better you get at sitting and thinking, the better you become as a chess player. So meditation, chess, reading are all things that I would highly recommend. And I think that you should take at least once a week to go somewhere and just leave your smartphone at home.
Yeah, like maybe a hike wouldn't be a good idea because if there was some sort of like if you fall or something, if there's an emergency, you might want a phone. But yeah, I used to leave my phone in the car when I would go on walks.
Yeah, I think
be
that's
free
probably,
from it.
Yeah, that's probably good advice for people, I think.
Yeah, maybe not like difficult terrain, but a nice stroll around the neighborhood, perhaps.
Now, if you're taking a cross-country drive, I would say you should probably take your phone with you.
Especially these days because like there's no phone booths or anything.
Oh, yeah. No pay
in a
phones.
lot of even like restaurants and stuff, they don't always have a phone you can use.
Yeah.
So.
However, breaking this addiction we seem to have to smartphones would definitely be an improvement. Getting off of TikTok, I think, and I don't scroll TikTok anymore. I got into a habit before I went to prison where I would use TikTok, but I found after prison that I just can't stand it. There's nothing on there for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because I also in prison lost the ability to multitask. And I did regain that once I got back out into the free world. But here in the free world, we're constantly multitasking. Like even right now while sitting here with you, I'm watching the timer on this recording to make sure that things don't go over. I'm making sure my dog doesn't do anything that she shouldn't be doing. She got sprayed by a skunk yesterday, so the list of things she should not be doing extended significantly.
Yeah.
Because like now she's not going to get on the couch and she's not going to brush up against us and all this other stuff. And I'm doing all of this while having this conversation with you and recording this podcast. In prison, you're only likely to be doing one of those things at any given time. There's just not enough to do for a person to multitask. Like when you go in there to check your emails, that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
You're not having a conversation with people. You're not reading a book. You're not listening to music. Sometimes I would listen to music, but usually not, because you don't have, one, you have a limited amount of time with which to do this. You only have 30 minutes before you have to log out, and then you can come back later, sure, but when you have a time limit, you don't want to be distracted, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's not enough to do anyway for you to just like, oh, I'm going to pause this email and listen to some music real quick or whatever. Whereas on the outside, we're constantly doing those things. And I don't know if that's good or bad that I struggle now to focus on one particular task. I'm a musician, and I do find it easy in that regard. Like if I sit down at my drum set to play drums, then for the next hour or so, that's pretty much all I'm doing other than opening my phone here or there to play a different song that I want to jam out to. But for the most part, like music is helpful in that regard as well, I think, in allowing a person to focus on one specific thing and to do only that one specific thing.
Because I'm sure if you were distracted, you'd fuck up whatever you're doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And it wouldn't be satisfying to play. At that point, at that point,
Well, and
you're not
also,
really
like,
playing drums,
so-
you're just sitting behind a drum set.
Yeah, and that's why it's so impressive when, especially drummers, when they can sing and play the drums. I know it's more common for guitarists to be singers, but I don't know if it's just the exertion of playing the drums that's far greater than playing the guitar. It always seems like very impressive. It's like, whoa.
It is insanely impressive. I don't know how any of them do it. I don't know how they play guitar and sing at the same time.
Yeah.
And I damn sure don't know how someone plays drums and sings at the same time. I'm not a big fan of the band Skillet, but the two females in that band are super talented. And one of them is a drummer. She also plays another instrument in the band, but she also sings while playing drums.
Wow.
And I don't know how the hell she does that.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, she's playing relatively simple beats during this, but still the amount of coordination and just ability it takes in order to do that is insane.
That's impressive.
But even then, the person who is singing and playing drums is still only engaging in one specific activity.
Yeah.
That's just a wider activity than just playing drums, I guess. But I can't carry on a conversation and play the guitar.
Yeah.
And I've been playing guitar long enough where a lot of it's just second nature. But once my brain wanders and I get distracted, that's it. I start missing notes and hitting the wrong strings. Mm-hmm. So music, chess, meditating, and leaving your phone at home, I think would help a lot of people with their anxiety. Yeah. It's going to suck at first.
Yeah, yeah. And I think people have like withdrawal from it too, because it is a very real addiction. I mean, you're not going to have like physical withdrawal like it's heroin, but still a lot of people, the anxiety and, the FOMO or whatever that comes up for people. And I do think that smartphones can be a very useful tool when they're used appropriately. And I just don't think that children have the ability to use technology like that responsibly.
Because I'm not sure adults do either.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, for a disciplined adult, it's definitely possible. But yeah, I mean, if adults can't even do it, I mean, it's crazy to expect a 5 or a 6-year-old to, you're just going to give them access to the internet. That's crazy.
You mentioned that smartphones can be powerful tools, and I think that's an important takeaway from today's episode because either you or your smartphone is going to be the tool in the relationship. Like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry to say that, but that's simply true. And I think in most of the relationships that people have with the smartphones, if they really evaluate it and they really think about the relationship, they'll find that they are the tool and their smartphone is using them. Mm-hmm. And not to suggest that smartphones have some sort of ulterior motive or that they're thinking or they're just doing what they've been programmed to do.
Yeah.
But you become sort of subservient to your smartphone instead of the other way around. Mm-hmm. And there are steps that you can take to prevent that and to help mitigate that. And the biggest one being, I would speculate, I've got no research to back this, by the way. This is just me speaking out of my ass. But I would think one of the best things you can do to combat this is to just set aside a few hours a day where you don't touch your smartphone. And maybe a few hours a day is too much. Start smaller. And you're going to experience anxiety, and it's going to suck when you come back and you see all of those notifications waiting on you. But what you're going to find is that the vast majority of those notifications are meaningless and completely useless, and that if you had had your phone in your hand, you would have just swiped them away, and that would be the end of it. Like I have a app on my phone that tells me when my cats go to the litter box, and that's completely useless to me. And I don't know why I haven't disabled it, but when I wake up in the morning, sure enough, there's 2 additional notifications every single day that someone visited the litter box. And I'm like...
It's weird that anyone wants to know that.
Well, it's helpful in some ways because I can clean it remotely. It's
okay.
it's a
So it
smart
doesn't
litter
do it all.
box
I
that
thought it did it.
flushes and stuff.
Yeah, I thought it did it automatically.
It can be set to do it automatically, but that's a huge waste because the little box of detergent, it's only good for like 180 washes or whatever. And the cats, they pee and they poop a lot, probably 10 times a day between the two of them. And that
The
means
robot litter box is so crazy, but that's we'll have to get into that next week.
this one is a little bit beyond that because this one actually like rinses the beads and flushes them, and it's all you got to do is remember to go and flush the toilet afterwards.
Whoa.
And that's it. It's almost as good as training your cats to use the toilet.
Yeah.
So, and it connects to most toilets and to your washroom. It made my life so much easier. I've been cleaning a litter box in like 3 weeks now.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
And it's nice. But I've got to do something about that app notifying me because it's most of the notifications I get are useless. And some of the ones that I might care about are perhaps some Facebook notifications like comments or something. But I don't need a notification from Facebook telling me when someone liked a post.
Yeah. And a lot of that, if you were to look at that 2 hours from now versus right this second, I mean, what difference is that really going to make?
Yeah, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
The vast majority of notifications that we get don't matter and don't need to be handled in a timely fashion. We could probably disable all notifications. I do that on my computers.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't do it on my smartphones. The first thing I do is disable all notifications. So maybe I should look into that. But at any rate, leave your smartphone at home every once in a while or just set aside a time period where you don't touch it. Learn a hobby that requires you to be engaged. Learn some chess maybe, and take up reading. All of these are simple things that you can do right now to improve your life and to help break the toxic relationship we have with our smartphones. So thank you for listening. We'll be back again, same time next week, or a day or two late as things have tended to be going lately, but it's fine. So thanks for listening. freetalklive.com is where you can listen to the radio show. But freetalkcast.com is where I want you to go to subscribe to the podcast. So thanks for listening. Have a good week.